Okay, we are ready.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the September 8, 2022 meeting of the Community Board Health and Human Services Committee. My name is Elvie Barroso, and I'm the chair of the committee. This meeting is called to order at 6:32 p.m. Tonight, we are joined by Assistant District Manager Brendan Bird. As a reminder, New York state law now requires all community board members to have their cameras on, their first and last names displayed from the time the meeting is called to order until the time the meeting is adjourned. If your camera is not on and your name not properly displayed, you cannot count towards quorum. Members of the public, you can raise any questions or comments that you have through the Q&A feature of Zoom. If there is time following the committee's discussion, we will field questions from the public. Hannah Singleman is taking minutes tonight. Thank you, Hannah. So you all should have received an email from the board office with a link to a doodle sign-up sheet for minutes takers at your committee meeting in 2022. For your convenience, the link to the sign-up sheet is being posted in the chat right now. We will now take attendance by roll call. Brendan will conduct the roll call.
Okay, committee members, when I call your name, you unmute yourselves. When I call your name, please say present. I will announce if there is quorum, and just as an additional side note to the new members, if I say any of your names incorrectly, please correct me with how I should say your name. Marty Barrett. Okay, I don't hear Marty. Elvie Barroso.
Present.
Jason Fromowitz.
Present.
Sadie Howard.
Present.
Sandra Leftoff.
Present.
Rich Mintz.
Present.
Raj, I know, can't be here tonight. Aisha Siddiqui.
Present.
Hannah Singleman.
Present.
Gabriel Turzo.
Present.
And Ronnie White. Okay, I don't hear Ronnie, but we do have a quorum.
Okay. The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and is reflected on the screen before you. If there is no objection, we will adopt the agenda. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the agenda, you may raise your hand through Zoom. Seeing no objections, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. The minutes from the May 12 meeting were distributed ahead of time by the board office. If there is no objection, we will adopt the minutes as drafted. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the minutes, you may raise your hand through Zoom. Seeing no objections, the minutes from the May 12 meeting are adopted. They will soon be available on the Community Board 6 website. In order to conduct an efficient meeting, let's observe a few ground rules. No one may speak until granted the floor. Committee members, if you have a question about committee business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand through Zoom. The chat function should not be used for committee business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. Chat should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties you are having or to state in writing information that was already stated aloud on the record during the meeting. When a committee member is given the floor to speak, I will identify you, and you can unmute yourself so that you can speak. We are required by New York state law to create a verbatim transcript of the meeting. So please keep your questions and comments succinct and germane to the discussion. Committee members are required by the state open meetings law to have their Zoom cameras on and your first and last name displayed during tonight's entire meeting, from call to order to adjournment. If you must step away from your computer briefly, you are required to leave your camera on. Our tonight's agenda. The first one is presentation. Well, actually, we only have one. Presentation from the New York City Smoke Free on their organization and the services they provide. The speaker for tonight's presentation is Stephanie Altman, the manager of the Manhattan Community Engagement of New York City Smoke Free at the Public Health Solutions. She works to end the devastating tobacco epidemic and protect the health of all New Yorkers through tobacco control policy, advocacy, and education. Prior to her working at the Public Health Solution, she worked with Medicare and Medicaid recipients, enrolling them in government and community programs to access essential services they needed. She also worked at the Montefiore School Health Program as a community health organizer, where she coordinated, implemented, and taught health education and youth development classes, as well as help implement school wellness policies. Stephanie earned her bachelor's in anthropology at Ithaca College in 2013. She went on to get her Master of Science in Public Health at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine in 2015. Let's welcome Stephanie.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. I also just wanted to introduce, I'm not the only speaker, Ayo, who is my colleague. Ayo, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, it's Ayo Ali. I'm a manager at NYC Smoke Free. We're happy to be here.
Yes. All right. Perfect. So I will. Thank you for having us. I appreciate all the coordination that took place to get us here. So I'm really excited to speak with you all. I'm sure as Ayo is as well. So just give me 1 second here. Okay, wonderful. So I will start presenting. Just minimize this. Wonderful. So yes, as mentioned, we are the team, Manhattan team of New York City Smoke Free Public Health Solutions. And our mission as the larger Public Health Solutions nonprofit is to support vulnerable families in achieving their optimal health and building the pathways to reach their potential. We are a health equity focused organization where we try to optimize all opportunities to help people reach the best outcomes for their health. In terms of our program in New York City Smoke Free, our mission is really to increase tobacco-free norms throughout the city, as we believe everybody has the right to breathe clean, smoke-free air where they live, work, and play. So we partner with community members, residential communities, legislators, youth advocates as well throughout the city, mostly Manhattan, to carry this work out. So I did some research on or as a team, we did some research on like the community health profile for Community Board 6. So this was actually pulled from the community health profile for District 6. And here you might, it's a lot of numbers and graphs. Basically, as we know, smoking can lead to a number of different health or chronic health diseases, whether that is mental or physical. So at looking at the rates for the hypertension is one of the diseases that can be a resultant of smoking. Community Board 6 has 22% prevalence, while Manhattan is 23. So I was looking at the numbers kind of across the board, and it just seems as if that the current population that's within Community Board 6 is probably at or above, slightly above what the prevalence rates are for the city. Another contributing factor to people who initiate smoking is mental health and perhaps whatever conditions that they are going through. So in the graph here in terms of the psychiatric hospitalization was really to highlight, the need for, not so much the need, but the opportunities that may be out there for people to initiate smoking as a coping mechanism. I bring this all to the table as you probably are privy to the information, but I think it really presents an opportunity for us to step in as the New York City Smoke-Free team and offer our services where it can be most beneficial for your community members. So in terms of the work that we do actually, to have that set the picture for us, offering why we're here and everything. So as part of the community engagement side, I help businesses and residential communities go smoke-free through voluntary policy adoption. So these are policies where we can prohibit smoking in front of the business or within a residential building, prohibit smoking in the different units and within the common areas and outside quarters of the building. So those are what they are. The benefits, I'm sure, again, you probably understand what the benefits of having a smoke-free environment is, but namely, no level of exposure to secondhand smoke, which is always, there's really no safe level of secondhand smoke. As for property values, property values go up, there's savings on insurance, things of that nature for property owners, landlords. Tobacco-free house or tobacco-free outdoors for businesses, obviously, it can deter business if someone is perhaps smoking in front of their business. So essentially my work is really to help provide the technical assistance, resources, and materials that are needed to get those voluntary policies in place. And just let you know, our services are free, so we would not be having, there's no fee for what we do. So with that being said, I will pass it off to Ayo to take over.
Thanks, Stephanie. I think Stephanie has laid the groundwork for why the work we're doing is extremely important. We all know that smoking is not good for you. We know that smoking is bad. But I think what tends to happen is like the conversation around smoking gets lost in all the other chronic issues that everyone's facing. And there's this tendency to believe that, hey, everyone knows smoking is bad. We're past that, but we're really not. And a very important way for you to see the way smoking has gone back up in high rates, especially vaping among youth. I want you to look at this graph. This is the youth smoking rates that goes all the way to about 2018. And what you notice in this 2017 is that smoking rates were actually starting to go down in New York City. Youth smoking rates, more specifically, were starting to go down in New York City. Then I want you to look at the next graph that comes up, right? Stephanie?
Hold on 1 second. Can you all see me? Oh, there we go. Sorry.
Thank you. So if you could go back one slide before, please. All right. So I want you to look at the smoking rates going down. Now we go to the slide after. So what you notice is smoking rates starting to go up when it comes to electronic cigarette use, which is basically vaping. So what we had is that the awareness around smoking had reached a point where people are starting to understand that, okay, this is not only bad for us, but young people start smoking at an early age. These rates are going down. 90% of those who smoke start before the age of 18, which tells you that basically 9 out of the 10 people you see walking on the streets that smoke, they started smoking before the age of 18. So if we're to combat the smoking epidemic that we're facing, we have to meet people where they are, especially at a younger age before the 18, because that's when they pick up the addiction. A lot of people you meet say, I want to stop smoking, I just can't stop. Well, the goal is to make sure they don't start to begin with. But it's become increasingly difficult when you look at the e-cigarette, vaping, electronic cigarette use, because what vaping has done is it's taken smoking rates back up. And we essentially have a vaping epidemic going on in the United States, but even more specifically in New York City, to the point where 1 in 3 high school students you meet probably vapes, or at least knows somebody who vapes. So where do we come in? Next slide, please, Stephanie. We come in, first of all, by educating people, allowing them to understand the danger in using e-cigs. Because what tends to happen is that tobacco companies have pushed this unsafe and problematic narrative that, hey, e-cigarettes or vaping is a good way for you to quit smoking. Or, you know what, those who vape are less likely to smoke. Well, here's the issue. You are essentially trading one addiction for the other. It is not that vaping or e-cigs is healthier than smoking. They're both equally bad. I always say to people, if you were holding a cup of coffee and it was really hot and somebody said, hey, this is like on a score of 1 to 10, 10 is really hot. And on a score of 1 to 10, 9 is really hot. Would you rather have 9 or 10? My answer would be like, I would rather not have any if it were to burn me, right? If you're going to pour the hot coffee on my body, because I feel like the pain threshold and burn threshold of 9 or 10 aren't that much different from each other. That's sort of the way to look at traditional conventional smoking and vaping. Why? Well, use of e-cigarettes is definitely unsafe for all, including kids, teens, and young adults. Use of ENDS, in this case, ENDS is an internal technical term we use for e-cigarettes, is higher among high school students and adults in New York, with 43.8% of students haven't tried e-cigarettes. Now, keep in mind that these numbers, we're trying to keep up with the latest numbers, but it keeps going up. Most e-cigarettes do contain nicotine, and nicotine is a highly addictive material, and it can harm adolescent brain development, which continues into the early to mid 20s, right? So we know nicotine is bad for us because it's in regular conventional cigarettes. Guess what? It's in e-cigs as well. And young people who use e-cigs are more likely to smoke cigarettes in the future. So what we're finding is that it's not one or the other. People are, especially young people, tend to use both together, right? Next slide, please. So where do we come in? Well, if 90% of those who smoke start before the age of 18, one of the best ways to combat this smoking epidemic and vaping epidemic that we're facing in New York City is to involve our youth, right? If I'm talking to 14-year-olds and 15-year-olds and the average smoker who starts to smoke at about 11 or 12, it's not to say that I can't get through to them, but it's more likely that their peers are the strongest advocates. Their peers, you know, their friends are the ones who are in conversation in spaces where we're not. And they can say, hey, you know, vaping is bad for you, but do you know it has this element and this material that is really dangerous? Do you know that tobacco companies target you? Do you know that they spend $9 billion a year on advertising? Many companies don't even make up to $1 million. Tobacco companies spend $9 billion on just advertising a lot. So there's a lot of money they make from vaping products. So this is where our youth engagement program Reality Check comes in, because we are turning our youth into the leaders that we believe them to be. We're turning them into advocates so that they can go into spaces and be present among their friends. For those of you who may have children or not have children or have loved ones, you know that a lot of habits that starts when you're younger, even as an adult, habits that start when you're young really follow you up into adulthood. In this case, it's an addiction. So what we've been able to do is to develop a really, really amazing program called Reality Check that is all over New York State and is all over New York City. I'm in charge of the program here in Manhattan. I'm very integral in developing it. And it's a youth action component, right? And it's student-led and we support it. And it's for the ages of 13 to 18. And we basically train our youth to become really strong advocates. They've met with elected officials. In this picture, what you're going to see is the Manhattan Borough president, Mark Levin. We took this picture with him when he was still a council member about 2 years ago. Now he's a Manhattan Borough president. And the people you see there are you meeting with him in front of City Hall, talking to him about the importance of this issue. The other lady, I can't remember her name, but I know she's currently the Queensboro president. So this advocacy work that we do really lies deep. It helps to develop our students in multiple ways because they become the leaders of today and tomorrow, but they are working on an issue that is so integral and personal to them. And I hope it's personal to this community board because especially as the health committee, you understand the importance of public health and the epidemic that we're facing. So students who join NYC Smoke-Free Reality Check program, they participate in elite activities and events that help to expose this tobacco industry and reduce the number of teens that are smoking, which is extremely important right now because, like I said, we are facing electronic cigarette, e-cigarette vaping epidemic. Next slide, please. So I want to show you this, right? My hair wasn't as long then, it's a little shorter, but a year and a half ago. This was a meeting that we were meeting with Community Board 9. We did a presentation with them on vaping, the dangerous effects of vaping and menthol. This was a really, really strong presentation because our youth came, they presented, and the board was extremely impressed, but they also left being more educated about vaping and menthol. By the way, menthol is a flavor used in cigarette products that makes the harshness of the tobacco going through your lungs, it makes it less harsh. It makes it like more soothing to take in, which is more likely for you to continue to smoke. That's another reason why tobacco companies use the menthol flavor, because they want to get people smoking early and be addicted. So in this Zoom, why I wanted to show you this picture is if you look a little bit further down, where easy. Okay, the second row to the left, you're going to see Senator Chuck Schumer. He also happened to be in that community board meeting, and he was really impressed by the work we're doing and said, hey, I know vaping is bad. I know menthol is bad. Let's see what we can do to work together. So our youth are going into community boards like yourself, and they're presenting on vaping and menthol and their experiences working with their peers and the kind of support they need to do the work they're doing. Now that the pandemic is not necessarily over, but there's a little bit sometimes in-person meetings, we're not yet sure how we're going to go back into that. But I think something that will be very exciting is if at some point we can come back to your full board and our youth can actually present to your board about the work they're doing and the importance of anti-smoking efforts and what they've done to really make a difference, and perhaps exploring ways that we can work together. So I just wanted to show you the Zoom so you could see that, like, we're meeting with other community boards, but you are the first community board that we've met with in this new fall semester situation. Back to school is kind of signals the start of a new session in NYC, because we just wanted to prioritize the work that we can potentially do with Community Board 6. So where does that take us? Because there's all this talking, we know smoking is bad, we now know it's an epidemic. You see the work NYC Smoke Free is doing, you see the work we're doing with youth, you see the work we're doing with smoke-free housing. I think this meeting would be pointless if we did not discuss concrete ways that we can work together going forward. The list is endless, but we just came with a few things that we mentioned as a way to start. First of all, I don't know if you have an e-blast. Do you have an e-blast?
Just to answer, I'm Brendan Burth, the Assistant District Manager at Community Board 6. We not only have e-blast, but also a monthly e-newsletter.
I love it, Brendan. That's exactly what I love to hear. By the way, your last name is pretty cool, Berth. I haven't seen that before. Thanks for your response. So I think what we could do is create a blurb for you, nothing too long. It's not going to be lengthy, probably 3-4 bullet points with a little paragraph on top, just talking about NYC Smoke Free and our services so that your constituents can know we're here for them. We get calls every day of buildings that are saying, hey, I want to go smoke free. How do we do it? Or, my neighbor smokes. It's really bothering me. I have COPD. I have an elderly grandmother or grandparent. I have kids. Or my wife is pregnant. And we've helped buildings successfully go smoke free. And at first it starts with, oh my God, everybody has a right to smoke. They can do what they like. And then we educate the public and we educate the building, and people start understanding, well, there's a reason why you don't have loud music at 4 a.m. on a Tuesday, right? So there's a reason why in New York City, where all buildings and rooms and apartments are connected, no matter how much you try to seal them, we often say, if your neighbor smokes, you smoke. And that education really goes a long way. And next thing you know, we've had some of the toughest buildings where again going smoke free, and now they're all smoke free. Also, a lot of luxury housing and condominiums are going smoke free. NYCHA has adopted a smoke free policy. So we can put this in your newsletter and e-blast so that your constituents are aware of the services we provide and some important facts about vaping, menthol, smoke free housing that we just shared on this call, because there's more people in your district that are on this call. So we need to educate them. Another thing we can do is maybe come back to present to your full board. This month would have been possible, maybe October or November. Our youth can come back and present to the full board. Probably need about 10 minutes. They can talk about the work they're doing and energize the board. And, we can obviously, as you know, with the full board, you're inviting members of the public, so we can really advertise it and get the word out that come and learn the truth about vaping, especially in light of coronavirus, and not compromising your lungs. And then the third thing I think is a way we can work together is refer us to buildings, building managers, people you may know, whatever it is that we can help their buildings go smoke free, or at the very least educate them on the benefits of it, which tends to be a really good starting point for eventually going smoke free. So that's where we are with it, and we are very open to answering your questions.
Yeah, thank you so much. And this is our contact information. Should you want to follow up or have any other concerns?
For sure. And I'm sure, like we've been communicating with you, you also have our contact information.
Yes, that is true.
Go.
Please stop sharing.
Thank you so much. So yeah, we're very open to answering any questions or thoughts or comments that you may have. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So thank you, Stephanie and Ayo, and Ayo, for speaking to us tonight about making us aware about this New York City smoke-free and about the benefits of having a smoke-free environment. So any questions from our members?
We also welcome comments as well, if needed. I think Gabriel raised his hand.
Okay, so I think I see Gabe. Gabe, yes.
Yes. Hi, that was a fantastic presentation. Thank you. I have a question about a graphic you included early on about mental health. And I was just wondering if you could expound on the linkage there and what that was about.
Of course. And I probably flew through it just to respect everyone's time. But basically, that was a pretty striking graphic for me to include within the presentation, only because mental health is actually one of the contributors to someone or to individuals initiating smoking. So it's not a blanket statement to say, like, if you have a mental health disorder, you're going to start smoking, but rather highlight that as kind of like as a bystanding or kind of a concern on the side of saying, if there are mental health concerns and folks may start smoking, that maybe we could start with our action sooner, if that makes sense.
Additionally, I think that another thing to point out that Stephanie was intimating with the presentation is that also that is a community that is also often forgotten when we think about different communities we're speaking to. Like, mental health is something that we all struggle with at some degree or level at some point. And historically, what smoking has been pushed to people as a stress releaser, as a way to cope. And so for us, just the same way that we're focusing on working with the youth, we also are mentioning the fact that this linkage exists and needs to be investigated. And that's a community within your district that we can certainly focus on. And I think what she was trying to do is just to show that linkage as something that to watch for and to think about as we think about the stressors that we've been conditioned to think that smoking is supposed to help. It's similar in a case, not the same, but also maybe perhaps the LGBTQ community where there's a high propensity for smoking rates. And you would say, well, what's the linkage? Well, there's no physical, biological linkage, but it's the fact that tobacco companies have been spending heavily for the last 30 to 40 years, investing, actually, that's the wrong word. I would say infiltrating that community with advertising. They were one of the biggest supporters of Pride, right? They kind of push cigarette smoking as a rebellious thing to do. It's one of the most dangerous things you could ever do, but there's a reason they were able to infiltrate that community. So just something to consider in terms of like why that linkage is there and what we're trying to do in showing that information. Something else I would, go ahead, Aisha. Well, Elvie, you're the moderator. Apologies.
Yeah, I see the hand up, Aisha. Aisha?
It's Aisha, but it's okay. I just had a quick question about secondhand smoke. I don't understand really the statistics of how likely you are to develop any type of illness or have any repercussions from secondhand smoke. And I was just wondering if you could explain that to me, because also another question is your organization helps with not mostly with people who are against other people smoking, or for resources for people who smoke or both?
Bro, we can answer that question. So the first one about secondhand smoke is, this is not a new fact. It's something that's been around for decades and decades, and understanding the bad effects of secondhand smoke is basically the reason why a lot of buildings always say that you have to be 20 feet from the building smoking, because if we're in a room or we're in a space and I am literally smoking, you are inhaling that smoke and it's going into your lungs. It's not firsthand because you're not the first person who is actually doing the smoking, but because you're around that smoke, it's literally going into your lungs, which is almost as dangerous. I would say similar to like on a scale of 1 to 10. If you smoking directly was as dangerous as 10, secondhand smoking is probably somewhere between 7 and 8 because you're essentially inhaling similar smoke into your lungs. It becomes problematic when we know in New York City, like the same way sound travels, smoke also travels, right? So like if my upstairs neighbor or my next door neighbor smokes, it's not like all the ceilings and everything is completely sealed, right? So now that smoke is coming in. If I have an issue with my lungs, you can develop COPD, right? If I'm a pregnant woman, that's the worst thing you can put in your body. If you have a history of asthma, that's the worst thing you can put in your body. So it's kind of the situation where like if people are smoking and secondhand smoking keeps spreading around because it is almost as bad as smoking itself, it's incredibly dangerous, which is why we really push for buildings to go smoke free, which is the same reason why in buildings, people don't smoke, they have to go outside. It's also the same reason like in 1987, the airline and air attendants union pushed for airplanes to go smoke free. That's why you can't smoke on a flight, because they were finding out a lot of their flight attendants were developing issues that were compromising their lungs, cancer, things of that nature. So that's the answer to your first question. The second one is our primary purpose here is education. So on one end, we're doing the advocacy with the youth, educating them, giving them leadership qualities and training so that they can be advocates in this issue with their peers who are being targeted by tobacco companies, right? And then on the second part is the fact that we're helping buildings to go smoke free, which we're actually doing a really good job of, because as buildings learn about the benefits of it, they're going incredibly further in wanting to go smoke free. Also, it actually helps to reduce rent because then there's less of the negative effects of the smoke all over the buildings, and buildings often have to refurbish when someone leaves, especially if they've been a smoker for a long time. We specifically are not working to help people who smoke combat the addiction. Our partners at NYU Treats, or NYC Treats, I think they're called. They're based at NYU. They are partners. They focus more on helping people who have an addiction to stop. Our focus is let's help you go smoke free to make where everybody lives healthier, because New York City, you breathe this air, I breathe this air. And on the second end, let us combat the negative infiltration of tobacco companies with advertising and publicity about their products so that everybody can work away educated. I hope that answers your question.
And I, do you mind if I add to?
Of course, please.
Aisha's question? Yeah, just some quick statistics for you, Aisha, just to give you like a context. So there's a myth that like there are products or technologies out there to help filter out the smoke from other apartments, but there really isn't. There are tests that have been shown that at least 65% of air is shared between units. So you can imagine how much air is coming into one's apartment if that's the case. You know, it can come through the ventilation system, through gaps in the flooring and the wall, any sort of opening where, you know, air can travel. If you think of how mice travel in a building, I think, you know, in the same way, smoke can travel likewise. And also secondhand smoke has been, I know, classified by the US Environmental Protection Agency as a Class A carcinogen, or like toxin. So it's actually really highly toxic. Just to give you some context of how dangerous it can be. I hope that helps.
Okay, we have another question from Gabe.
Thank you. Do you have any data on what percentage of buildings in this community board or Manhattan or by borough still allow smoking? Is this?
To be honest, I don't have that offhand. I could definitely look it up though. There is a smoking. I can definitely follow up with you if that's helpful. Yeah, I just don't have that data offhand. That would have been a great piece of information to have for relevancy. But I can follow up with you about that. You know.
Okay, so we have another question from Jason.
Yeah, I had two questions. First one, is there a particular focus that your organization has around type of building, or you're primarily focused on public housing, co-ops, condos, rental buildings, or all the above?
All of the above. Stephanie, I'll chime in on this one. So all of the above. Historically, I would say we've had a high rate of buildings go smoke free in Manhattan. We work in every borough, but each year what tends to be is we have the largest amount of units in Manhattan going smoke-free. They tend to be I would say high-rise buildings, luxury condominiums going smoke-free. That tends to be the highest percentage of buildings that are going smoke-free. However, NYCHA implemented a regulation about 2 years ago that they wanted all their buildings to go smoke-free. So right now, technically in NYCHA buildings, you're not supposed to be smoking. NYCHA tries to, work that line between, we already live in a rent burden city. So we do not advocate evicting anybody because they smoke. That's the absolute last thing we want to do. Nobody in New York City wants to go through that. We all know how high rent is. But what we've just done is our main focus is really the education part, because whenever we find resistance to buildings going smoke-free, we find that changes the more you educate people. And then people who have issues with the smoking affecting them, they become really vocal and say, hey, this is what's going on. This is what I've been dealing with. And we tend to find that there's already those complaints happening. So we've been able to sort of make the process of going smoke-free a whole lot easier. But yes, we are in everywhere. But I will say, if you have to ask me the fastest rate of buildings going smoke-free, I would say it's probably luxury buildings, condominiums. Yeah.
And then the other question I had, how do you typically handle buildings going smoke-free in-place residents who are already smokers? What do their objections look like? How are policies generally look like from those stakeholders?
So at the end of the day, I think it really always comes down to what the building wants to do, right? Like we just worked with a building on East 26th, I'm not sure, about a month ago, and they went smoke-free. The reality is this, there's always this sentiment of, I don't want to tell people what to do. I want people to be able to do what they like to do in their homes, which we are all for. But the same analogy I was giving about playing loud music at 4 a.m., if what you're doing in your building, in your apartment starts to negatively affect mine, then we need to have a conversation about it. What we tend to find is that when the worst thing a building can do is to just say, we're going smoke-free tomorrow. It never works. So there's this deep in education where there's open sessions, people can come and talk about what's going on. We inform them about the benefits, and it's meant for the building ultimately to carry it out and make sure that it adheres to their guidelines of how they bring in new policies. As far as those people who already smoke, one thing I found historically in the work I've been doing, and I've been in this work for years, most people who smoke don't want people around them smoking. Most people who smoke don't want their children smoking. They don't want their loved ones smoking. They're kind of like, I smoke, it's an addiction, I'm trying to fight it, but I don't want people around me to pick it up. So we find that a lot of people who smoke tend to actually want to step outside of their apartments to do the smoking. But as far as how this policies come to life, we help the building do that. And the building kind of determines what happens to people who already smoke. But we find that sometimes the biggest supporters of going smoke-free are actually smokers themselves.
Thank you.
I see the hand of Sandra.
Yeah, hi, thank you for your presentation. I was wondering what you would hope would come from a partnership with the community board. What happened? You did partner, or you presented at another community board that you were showing us, but what would be your views of what we do together, or what your expectations are, even in the presentation, what you hope to accomplish? Yes.
So I think the first thing is always education, right? Some of the people I've met who smoke say, hey, I wish I never started, right? And when you find out why people start smoking, a lot of the times they're not aware about how much of an effect advertising really works, right? So I'll give you an example. When you walk into a bodega, the cigarettes are behind the cashier, and it's on the high level of an average 7-year-old. The reason that the cigarettes are behind the bodega counter cashier is because it's called the point of sale. Everybody who walks into a bodega, walks out of a bodega, has to go through the entry point. So there's a brand recognition, right? The other thing is that at a young age, at about 8, and the average smoker actually starts at 11, you're starting to see just where you see candy and you see gum, you're also seeing tobacco products. So you're sort of identifying yourself as a young person, identified as something that is normalized that you can pick up. So I give this analogy to say that the biggest thing I think we can achieve with working with you all is the educational piece, because we may educate further all the people who come and attend this presentation to know more than they knew prior to coming inside of the presentation. So education is always extremely important. I think the second thing is that we may be able to concretely work with buildings who are actually in your district, who are interested in going smoke-free. We may be able to help them with that. Also, there's all these resources we present, right? So anybody who comes to the board or any event we do, we're collaborating with you. your constituents in your district or wherever is in this meeting, just like now, is going to walk away knowing more than they did before coming in, and know that we exist to be able to support and partner with them. So those are just some tangible things that I can point to that I think will be a beneficial way and reasons for us to work together. And that's what we've achieved with the other boards we've done. We worked with Senator Byron Benjamin in the past to do an event on Facebook Live. The presentation, like I said, we brought in a lot of people. We had about 50 people who were present. And it really helps to build a relationship that at the end of the day furthers the health needs of your constituents.
Okay, I see two more hands. Rich?
Yes, I have a follow-up to, I think, the question Jason asked, which is, I don't smoke, I've never smoked, but I have family members and people I love who do, including people who smoke in a way that is tied up with their mental illness, who are never going to be able to quit. And I'm wondering what you say to someone like that who has lived in New York City their entire life and you know, it isn't realistic to get that person to quit at this stage of life and needs to live somewhere. I'm not hostile to this in any way. I'm thinking it through because, you know, we have to deal with this.
I can take that unless Stephanie wants to chime in. So I think it's important to understand that why we're here at the end of the day is education, right? So this conversation about what you're asking about in making the ultimate decision, we're not the ones that are going to make it. And ultimately, I've never been in a building where they kicked somebody out because they smoked, right? It's usually the education part that I think is the most central part of it. And a lot of the buildings that we are usually helping to go smoke free, I would say that, like, you know, you don't know anybody's different, like, mental health issues or what they're going through. So you can't meet someone and say, hey, I know what you're going through. But a lot of the times I've been in this position for over 5 years. We've never worked with a building that's kicked anyone out of their buildings before because they were smoking or that had a mental health issue, and smoking was a central part of how they coped with it. I think the second thing is we have to understand is, like, anything you do, there's always going to be potential drawbacks. But our focus and the work we do at this point and the potential work we can do with this community board if we collaborated, the biggest thing there is the educational piece, right? So if we're educating people and, you know, more people are knowing about how tobacco companies target them, more people are knowing the way youth start to pick up smoking, more people are aware about the services we provide, there's already some success in that. Because guess what? The same issue you brought up, we're also facing $9 billion of it. We're facing vaping becoming a thing that is normalized and is cool. And for those who may be older than even my time, there's the whole thing about the master settlement agreement where tobacco companies for years knew about the dangers of smoking and hid it from, like, Americans. And it took a lawsuit. All the lawsuits that are gone against them, they were always losing because people was like, they would say, we didn't force people to smoke. They can do whatever they want to do. But we found out that, like, they were not letting people know the dangers of smoking. You know, Ronald Reagan, for Christ's sakes, was in a commercial promoting smoking, and he's one of the administration that passed one of the laws about increasing, like, health awareness around smoking when they found that out. Also, a lot of our taxpayer dollars goes into helping people to quit this addiction. And that's why the Master Settlement Agreement said, like, for all the people you addicted in your products, you're going to give us the money back because we need to treat them. So I understand what you're saying, Richard, and I'm not going to dismiss that, and it's neither here nor there. But I think what we could really do is we can think about all the potential drawbacks, or we could think about how can we work together to educate your constituents, ultimately while knowing that what we're advocating for is for nobody to be kicked out of their building, which in the years I've done this job, it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah. So are you and Stephanie, do you have brochure or flyer that we can put in our newsletter?
Absolutely. Yeah, I can send that over as a follow-up to some other questions we had to Elby and Brendan. So that's no problem.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we have one last question. Aisha, you have another question?
Yeah, I was wondering if e-cigarette smoke affects like the same way secondhand smoke does with cigarettes, and with the education part. I was wondering because I'm a teenager. I know a lot about smoking. I was wondering if the education part includes like not only why smoking is bad and why secondhand smoke is bad, but also why people smoke in the first place. Because I know you said mental health is one of the reasons why, and I know you said
it's not one of the reasons why people smoke. We were just linking it, but it's usually
Yeah.
not the primary reason, by the
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, but exactly. Sorry. But just I'm aware that some people cope with some of their
Smoking
underlying
as a coping
issues.
mechanism. Yeah. Mhm.
Yes. And use smoking as harm reduction. And I was wondering, I really like how you include like you educate the youth about this, because it is a huge issue, especially among teenagers. And I was wondering, when you educate these youth, like, do you tell them also about like why like people use smoking as like a coping mechanism?
Awesome. I can answer both. So first of all, e-cigarettes and vaping is worse than secondhand smoking.
Okay.
Because you're basically putting it directly into your system, as opposed to secondhand smoking where there's one layer. It's bad, but it's not the same. Also, what a lot of people think is like vaping is less harmful. It's just as bad because there's carcinogens. Some of the stuff that you find in the airplane window cleaners, you also find it in e-cigs. Also, e-cig companies have been fighting basically like releasing all the ingredients in their products, which is similar to the tactic that tobacco companies, it's all the same, they're all tobacco companies, but tobacco companies used 30, 40 years ago with cigarettes, because it's just like, if everyone doesn't know whatever it's in it, then we can't say how bad it is. And then eventually it came out and we knew that they knew. So it's one of those things where like, I've seen the advent of how vaping has taken over. And, you know, we're going to go through the same cycle, unfortunately, in 10 years, where you will find out that they knew it and you're like, oh my God, we didn't know. It was a new thing we were still discovering. Like, but if there are carcinogens and toxins in the product already, and you've not yet said everything that's in it, like the clear indicator is that it's horrible for you. Also, there's videos on YouTube you'll find of people who mention how addicted to vaping they are. Many people I know who vape, they wake up just the same way a lot of us are. Some have a addiction to our cell phones. They wake up and the first thing they pick up is like a vape. And there, one of my youth advocates mentioned how one of her friends plays soccer, and before they start the game, vapes. I'm like, you're running and playing soccer and you're vaping. So there's no judgment, but it's just to understand like that's what an addiction is. It's not like it's easy to stop. It's the fact that the work we're doing a lot with the youth is trying to prevent them from starting, because if 90% of those who smoke start before the age of 18, we know that this is the time that we can actually reach them. Year 1 or year 2 into an addiction is different from year 5 or year 10 into an addiction. That's why people really celebrate when they stop smoking, because it's like a huge deal. So we're like, let's get you not started, but if you just started, let's educate you enough to stop, because we never like are judgmental about it. Now, the coping mechanism thing that you mentioned, I have to be very clear. Like, we are not a mental health agency, right? Like, there are all these other things that are out there to help people cope. So we are no experts, and we have to be very upfront about that. Any of my youth who have come up and have a conversation, I educate them as much as I can and pass them on to resources of experts who are good at that. But here's what I will say. We all try to find different things as coping mechanisms. There are people who say, you know, I like to run a lot because I can think. So there's people like, I have a therapist because I have to go and talk and go through the things I'm going through. There are difference between, you know, positive coping mechanisms and dangerous coping mechanisms that helps you, that puts you in a more precarious situation that you're already in. And what tends to happen is that historically we've been conditioned to think that smoking is a stress reliever. But there's nothing pointing to the fact that inhaling tobacco smoke actually makes you less stressful. It's what you attribute to it. So I think a lot of what we're just trying to do with the youth we're working with is to say, hey, these are issues that people who are way older than you are facing. Maybe we can help you by not starting. And then for the smoke-free housing buildings, let's help you go smoke-free. And then for people who want to like perhaps quit their addiction, New York City is actually one of the foremost cities with multiple resources to help people quit. And we point them to those things, even though that's not the work we do. I'm not an expert in helping people quit. So I hope that I can answer some of your questions.
All right, so I have one last question for you, Stephanie and Ion. So do you collaborate with the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, because they have the resources that,
We do.
I pointed out.
We do. DOHMH is one of our biggest partners. Like, we do a lot of education with them. Some of the resources we share comes from them. We have ours as well. Also, some of the latest statistics that we receive comes from them. We're very instrumental in actually passing the Clean Air Act. I think it was about 20 years ago with the Bloomberg administration. We were central in that work. So we've been doing this work for a very, very long time. I know our time is coming to an end, but what I would encourage this community board to think about is, besides the information that we're doing with this newsletter, if you imagine the amount of questions we're just being asked in this meeting alone, think about what the full board would have to say or think about what constituents might think about. There's so much information that can go from education, and I think that's what we would love to come and do another presentation, but not with us this time around, but with our youth, so you can hear from them as to like what they're going through as a teenager, surrounded by, nowadays, as a smoke shop popping up on every high school corner. Some of the youth I've worked with talk about feeling this pressure. They talk about sometimes like their friends vaping and thinking, hey, I want to try it too. On a positive note, one of my youth, he just went to college. Well, I guess college is starting this week. He was a senior. One of his friends actually, I think it was about 2 months ago, she messaged him and said, hey, I realize that I have a vaping problem. And I know you're the guy in school who's always talking about vaping and how bad it is with the program, not in a judgmental way, by the way, but hey, what can I do to stop? And I had to look up resources to send her to say, hey, this is some things we can do. But that was special to me because that's somebody who reached out, even though it wasn't on the education piece. She recognized that she had an issue and wanted to do something about it. So like the word does get across. And I will say, lastly, I remember, I have 2 older brothers, we fought a lot growing up, but I always say some of the things that they would say sometimes, even I'll disagree with them and later I'll think about it. Oh, I guess maybe you have a point. So education really, really goes a long way. And if 1 or 2 people stop vaping or don't stop vaping because they heard us say something, that's a lifetime of addiction and a lot of money and time and health issues that it could potentially present. So we are welcome to working together. We choose some of the ways we suggested, but you may even have other ideas as well. I just hope that you consider that, and hopefully this leads to something fruitful. Stephanie, anything to add before we get kicked out of here?
No, beautifully said. We'll be in touch for sure, but we'll follow up with those items as requested.
Brandon is gonna see the possibility of you guys coming to the full board meeting, so he's gonna let you know.
Perfect.
And again, thank you so much for coming.
Of course, thank you for having me.
We really enjoyed this. Thank you for your very thoughtful questions. Aisha, I really appreciate your questions. Richard as well. Brendan, thanks for supporting us and letting us know we could do the board. I think I'm calling everybody's name because everybody just about asked a question. So we hope to see you again, and ciao, ciao. Enjoy your evening.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Okay, so we're gonna go to the chair's report. So I don't have that much. I would like to welcome the new members to our committee: Aisha Siddiqui, Gabe Turso, Jason Fromowich. Did I pronounce that, Jason, right?
You got it. Perfect. Thank you.
And Sadie Howard. So we look forward to your active involvement in this committee. Feel free to ask questions and make suggestions on topics that concern health and human services, or any issues concerning health or any services that will benefit members of our community. So since December 2020, the committee has been focused on connecting with our local healthcare providers, providing accurate and reliable information to the public, and being proactive in voicing the concerns and issues of our communities. We successfully accomplished some projects during the pandemic. On January 2021, at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, we successfully organized a virtual town hall meeting that addressed the COVID-19 vaccine hesitancy. It was attended by over 100 people. In September 2021, we started to organize a series of webinars on healthy living in the community in collaboration with the New York University Langone Health. And the purpose of the webinars were to provide accurate and reliable health information to our community. In addition, it was an opportunity to learn from speakers with expertise on those topics, and also an opportunity for members of the community to ask questions. So we are right now in the process of organizing the fourth one this fall. We haven't finalized the topic. Feel free to make suggestions on future topics or projects that are relevant to health and human services and that you feel would be beneficial to our community. Or any issue or problem you see in our community pertaining to health and human services that can be addressed by Community Board 6, let us know. I advise the new members to read our past minutes that are posted on our website, so you will have an idea of the issues and topics that this committee addressed in the past. So now we're going to go to the old and new business. If any member of the committee has any old or new business, please raise your hand. So if there are no new or old business or any objections, we will adjourn the meeting. So seeing no further business, the meeting is adjourned at 7:28 p.m.